My name is Betty Hayslett, and I'm 28 years old. And even now, 15 years later, I can still feel the cold sting of the night my childhood ended. Not slowly, not quietly, but in a single violent snap, like a branch breaking under too much weight. I was 13 when I learned two truths. Childhood doesn't last forever, and sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the first to throw you away. It didn't start with the moment they left me at a rest stop. That was just the finale. Before that, it was 1,000 small cuts I didn't understand yet. The way my mother's face softened when she looked at my older sister Celine, but hardened whenever her eyes landed on me. The way my father lit up when my brother Nate scored a goal, but barely blinked when I brought home straight A's. I thought that was normal. I thought maybe if I tried harder, I'd earn what they gave so freely to the others. Looking back now, I see how early it began, the subtle favoritism, the emotional neglect, the tiny signals that I wasn't part of the family orbit. I was tolerated, not loved, present, but invisible. The quiet girl who learned early that silence made adults less angry. But none of that compared to the moment everything broke. I was 13. It was a cloudy summer evening, the sky bruised blue and gray. We were on our way to my dad's cousin's retirement party, a 2-hour drive each way. Nobody wanted to go. Celine had friends to see. Nate wanted to stay home and play video games. And I wanted anything that wasn't another long car ride full of sighs directed at me. But I said the wrong thing. I said I didn't want to go either. My mother's eyes snapped to me in the rearview mirror. "You don't get a vote, Betty." That was all. We rode in silence, except for Nate elbowing me every few minutes and pretending it was an accident. An hour in, he loudly complained he was starving. My mother told my dad to pull into the next rest stop. He grumbled something about me probably needing to use the bathroom anyway. I did. I went inside. I washed my hands. I took maybe 2 minutes. When I walked back outside the parking spot where our car had been was empty. For a moment, I honestly believed they were hiding some twisted attempt at humor, even though humor wasn't something my family ever used with me. I waited 5 minutes. 10. I walked the length of the lot. I checked behind the vending machines. I stood under the flickering yellow safety light and listened for the sound of our engine. Nothing. My stomach dropped. My hands shook. I took out the cheap little flip phone my parents let me use only for emergencies, and this was an emergency, if I ever lived one. I called my mom, straight to voicemail. My dad, also voicemail. I didn't bother with Celine or Nate. They never answered me, even when I was standing right beside them. So I waited and waited. And somewhere between the sun setting and the chill creeping in, reality settled like a stone in my chest. They weren't coming back for me. I found a shallow ditch at the edge of the rest stop where the weeds were tall and the wind felt slightly less sharp. I curled up there with my hoodie over my head. My backpack became a pillow. The ground was damp cold, unforgiving. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't do anything but stare at the stars and wonder if disappearing was easier than being forgotten. By morning, I forced myself out of the ditch and back to the road. A woman in an old sedan pulled over when she saw me walking with my thumb out. She had a teenage son in the front seat. I lied and said I got separated from my family on a trip. She believed me, gave me a granola bar and $20. I thanked her and got out 5 blocks from home. My own feet did the rest. When I pushed open the back door of our house, no one even turned their head. My mom folded laundry. My dad watched TV. Celine painted her nails. Nate rummaged through the fridge. "You're back," my mother said, as if I had stepped out for a gallon of milk. No apology, no explanation, just that. Something inside me cracked, but not loudly. More like a quiet earthquake deep underground. Shifting plates so slowly you don't realize the damage until years later. After that day, I moved through our home like a ghost. No one asked what happened. No one acknowledged leaving me behind. It was as if the incident got erased like a page torn from a family photo album. The next 5 years blurred into something dull and numb. I waited for someone to notice my hurt, to say they were sorry to admit what they had done. No one ever did. So when I turned 18, I packed my things and left without a note. I changed my number. I lived 3 states away. I worked hard, built a life, carved out quiet pockets of peace wherever I could find them. For a decade, I didn't look back. Until last week. An envelope slid through my mail slot, heavy cream-colored, embossed with gold. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Celine had always made her letters look like art. On the back, in silver ink, "Please read what's inside. They're trying Betty." Inside, I found her wedding invitation, a glossy illustration of her and her fiancé Marcus. Folded behind it, a note from my mother. Betty, it's been too long. Life is short. Mistakes were made. Let's put the past behind us. Please come. We miss you. Misses were not apologies. Mistakes were not accountability. And the past was not a rest stop, a ditch a night spent alone, wondering if anyone cared if I lived. I stared at that letter until my hands shook. Not from anger, from a grief so old it was practically fossilized. I should have thrown the whole thing out, but I didn't. I stood in my hallway holding that envelope like it was a detonator, and somewhere deep inside, the girl I used to be, the girl who slept in a ditch and waited for headlights that never came, whispered something. Make them see me. I didn't know how yet, but I knew this: if I went to that wedding, I wouldn't be going as the forgotten daughter. I'd be going as the woman they created, the one who survived. And this time they weren't ready for me. When people talk about childhood, they describe warm kitchens, loud laughter, familiar hands brushing hair out of their face. My memories aren't like that. They're quieter, harder, sharper around the edges. The summer everything broke didn't come out of nowhere. It built itself in layers, little moments that didn't seem connected until they all snapped into place. I was 12 going on 13, and our house felt like a pressure cooker. My mom had started picking up double shifts at the hospital. My dad's landscaping business was falling apart. Bills piled up on the counter like accusations. Every conversation dissolved into shouting. And yet somehow every crack in the family foundation was blamed on me. That was the summer my mother stopped buying the cereal. I liked budget cuts, she said, dropping a bag of tasteless off-brand flakes into the pantry. My allowance disappeared. My birthday that year was a single card from Celine with no gift, no hug, just a sticky note that read, "We're all struggling." But Nate got new football cleats that cost more than my entire school wardrobe. Celine got a new phone. I got silence. One afternoon, I walked in from the library, my only refuge that summer, and caught Nate bragging about his new gear. I asked how we could afford it. My mom didn't look up from her laptop. "They're an investment," she said flatly. "And what am I?" I asked before I could stop myself. That made her finally look at me. "Don't start," she snapped. "You don't understand how hard it is keeping this house afloat. You just sit around reading and think the world owes you something." I don't. Grow up, Betty. That phrase, those two words. In my house, grow up didn't mean mature. It meant shut your mouth. It meant stop asking for affection. It meant be invisible. So I tried. I did extra chores, laundry, dishes, sweeping, cooking. I kept my voice small, my presence smaller. I stopped asking for anything. Not clothes, not rides, not attention, not love. But the more invisible I became, the more irritated they seemed by me. Nate started calling me dead weight. Sometimes the shadow. Sometimes nothing at all, not even my name. Celine never bullied me outright, but she stepped over my hurt like it wasn't there. If she saw Mom snap at me, she rolled her eyes and left the room. If she saw Dad yell at me for breathing too loudly, she'd mutter, "Just ignore it," and walk away. The message was clear. I was the only one expected to carry the weight of the family's misery. The night everything shifted was the night the power got shut off. We were eating rice and beans, lit by the dull orange glow of 2 candles. The power company had cut us off that afternoon. The house smelled like burnt wick and frustration. Trying to soften the tension, I shared something I'd read earlier at the library. "Did you know the ancient Greeks used mirrors to start fires using sunlight?" I said quietly. Nate snorted. "Wow, thanks, National Geographic. Super helpful." Celine smirked. But the worst was my dad. He slammed his palm down on the table so hard the silverware rattled. "Why don't you shut up for once?" he growled. I froze. Every time you open your mouth, it's some useless fact. Does that put food on the table? Does that pay the bills? No. It's noise. Just noise. The words hit me like a slap. Noise, that's all I was to him. My mother kept eating. Nate kept smirking. Celine picked at her nails. And I realized that even if the room was full, I was utterly painfully alone. The next morning, my mom knocked on my door once hard, like she was annoyed to do it. "We're driving to Uncle Rick's retirement thing tomorrow. Be ready by 10. That was it. No explanation. No hint that the night before had been the tipping point for me. Just orders. Something inside me whispered a warning I didn't yet know how to interpret. A tightness in my chest. A sense of dread crawling under my skin. That night I quietly packed a small bag, just in case. 2 shirts, a water bottle, a paperback I loved, a disposable camera I'd gotten for my birthday the year before, one they'd all forgotten. I didn't know why I did it. I just knew. The next day I barely spoke in the car. Neither did anyone else. The silence between us felt like another passenger heavy suffocating. Around the halfway mark, Nate whined that he was hungry. My mother sighed dramatically and told my dad to pull into the next rest stop. He obeyed. "We might as well let Betty go," Dad muttered. "She always needs something." I didn't argue. I didn't want to give them any reason to look at me. The rest stop was one of those sad ones, 2 vending machines, flickering light, a cracked sidewalk leading to a dirty bathroom. I went in. I washed my hands. I lingered a second to avoid the next round of sighs and complaints. When I walked back out into the sunlight, blinking shoulders still tense, the car was gone. Not parked somewhere else, not hidden as a joke, gone. At first, I honestly believed they would pull back in any second. Surely even they wouldn't. But the minutes crawled. The sun dipped lower. My heartbeat grew louder than the highway behind me. I called my mother. Voicemail. "Dad, voicemail." I stood in that empty parking lot with my phone shaking in my hand and felt something inside me collapse. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like giving up breath. I sat on the curb for what felt like hours before finally accepting it. They weren't coming back. So I found a ditch behind the rest stop and curled inside it. The weeds scratched my arms. The ground was cold. The sky stretched over me like a ceiling I didn't understand. Every star looked sharp enough to cut. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't scream for them. I don't think I knew how to scream back then, not for myself. When morning came, I walked and walked and walked. A woman eventually pulled over and saved me without knowing she had saved me. She fed me. She gave me $20. She asked if I needed anything else. No one in my family had ever asked me that. When I got home, the door wasn't even locked. My mother turned around like I had just stepped out to check the mail. "You're back," she said. No apology, no fear, nothing. But what really ended things, what burned the last fragile bridge, was what she said when I finally found my voice. "You left me," I whispered. My father snorted. "You took too long. We figured you got a ride." "You left a kid in the middle of nowhere," I said louder. My mother's face hardened. "You're not a child anymore, Betty. Grow up." That was the moment the girl I had been finally broke. And in the pieces, a different version of me began forming, one who learned that silence didn't keep me safe, it kept me erased. That version of me would take years to assemble, years to understand, years to find strength again. But she started right there, in that kitchen, in that silence, in that sentence. "Grow up." Years later I did, and now they would see exactly what that meant. There's a strange thing that happens when you survive something you never talk about. It sits inside you, like a room in a house you never enter. The door stays shut, the lights stay off, and you pretend you don't hear anything moving around in there. But the room doesn't disappear. It waits. For years, I avoided that room. I avoided thinking about the ditch, the rest stop, the weight of being left behind. I avoided remembering how my mother's face didn't change when I walked back in the house. I avoided remembering how my father brushed off my words like lint. Instead, I focused on escape. At 18, I packed my things, left before sunrise, and didn't look back. And for a while, it worked. Distance became a kind of medicine. My life slowly expanded around the wound they'd left in me like muscle forming around a broken bone. College, a job in graphic design, friends who laughed with me instead of at me, a boyfriend who actually listened when I spoke. I built a small, quiet life made of gentle things I had never gotten at home. I decorated my apartment with soft colors. I bought my own dishes. I hung thrift store art and took pride in my mismatched furniture because it was mine, chosen by me, untouched by anyone else's cruelty. I even adopted a cat, a fat tabby named Hugo, who loved curling on my lap during movie nights. He'd purr against my chest, and that simple vibration felt like something I'd missed for years, warmth without conditions. But healing is not a straight line. It's more like circling a drain, getting close to clarity, then slipping away again. Therapy helped. I met Dana, my therapist, 4 years ago. She had silver curls, sharp eyes, and the frustrating habit of sitting in silence until I filled it. In our first session, she said almost nothing while I rambled about work, stress, relationship doubts, and just childhood stuff that doesn't matter anymore. After 15 minutes, she asked one question. "Betty, do you think it's normal for a 13-year-old girl to sleep in a ditch?" I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. Dana didn't let it go. She nudged. She pressed. She named things I'd spent years convincing myself weren't real. Abandonment, neglect, emotional abuse. Words that stuck in my throat like stones. Dana taught me something important. Just because you survive something doesn't mean it wasn't trauma. But even with therapy, even with distance, even with a life I built on my own terms, one envelope, one message in silver ink, one wedding invitation, was enough to crack everything open again. Celine's handwriting was just as perfect as ever. Elegant loops, soft curves, polished like the girl who always got the good things. She'd written 5 words on the back. Please read what's inside. They're trying Betty. Trying. Trying what? Trying to pretend nothing happened. Trying to rewrite history. Trying to call their abandonment of me a mistake like a lost receipt or a forgotten appointment. I didn't open it right away. I walked around my apartment for 10 minutes, gripping the envelope like it was venomous. When I finally tore it open, the invitation fluttered out a watercolor sketch of Celine and her fiancé Marcus both smiling like they'd stepped straight out of a styled photo shoot. But the real blow was the folded letter tucked behind it. Betty, it's been too long. We know you've kept your distance, and we understand. Mistakes were made, but life is short. We would love to see the whole family together again. Please come to the wedding. We miss you. Mom. My knees actually trembled. Mistakes were made. Passive voice. No subject. No responsibility. Life is short. Translation. Bury the past for our convenience. We miss you. How they never knew me to begin with. My stomach twisted. My breathing hitched. And for the first time in years, I felt 13 again, small, cold, forgotten, lying in that ditch, waiting for headlights. I set the letter down like it was a live wire. My vision blurred. My chest tightened, the way it always did when old memories crawled up my throat. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I didn't need to go. I told myself that the girl I used to be was dead and gone and buried. But the truth was uglier. The girl I used to be had never died. She'd just gone quiet. And that wedding invitation brought her back like a ghost dragging chains. I spent the next few days spiraling. The nightmares returned me, standing under that flickering rest stop light, staring at an empty parking space, waiting for a car that never came. I stopped answering texts, stopped eating real meals, stopped listening to my boyfriend when he tried to ask if I was okay. My apartment became silent and dim. Dishes piled up. The air felt stale. Work emails sat unopened. And every time I walked past that invitation on my entryway table, it felt like a dare. A small, pathetic hope, the kind that children cling to, kept whispering, maybe they're finally sorry. That hope disgusted me, because I'd worked so hard to kill it. One night, after drinking too much wine and falling asleep on the couch, I woke up with a dry mouth and a pounding head. The TV was still on. Hugo curled on my stomach like a warm stone. This can't be it, I whispered into the empty room. Not my life, not my story, not my ending. And that tiny whisper, soft, fragile, almost too small to hear, became the spark I needed. I got up, showered, opened the blinds, forced myself to eat a real breakfast, answered my boss's email, went for a run that nearly killed my lungs. I felt alive for the first time in weeks. That was when clarity hit me. Not loud, not dramatic, just a slow, steady truth sliding into place. They couldn't take anything from me anymore because I had already built a life without them. They didn't know me, not the woman I had become, not the work I did, not the home I lived in, not the friends I made, not the laughter I found, not the love I learned to accept. So why was I letting one envelope drag me back into the dark? Why was I letting people who forgot me at a highway rest stop hold any power at all? Donna asked me a question next session, one that stuck in my ribs like a blade. What does justice look like for you, Betty? Not revenge, not escape, not silence. Justice. I didn't have an answer, not yet. But I knew one thing. Whatever justice looked like, whatever healing looked like, whatever reclaiming my voice looked like, it wasn't going to happen by staying away. It was going to happen by walking straight into the place where they expected me to remain invisible, and making them see me. All of me. And for the first time since I was 13, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. Justice doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it comes quietly through a decision so small you barely notice yourself making it. For me, justice began with a printer, a stack of thick paper, and a memory I could no longer pretend wasn't real. It started the night I pulled out an old storage box from the top shelf of my closet. Inside it were fragments of the life I built away from them. College programs, photos from my first apartment, birthday cards from friends who had become the family I chose. And then buried beneath everything else, I found something I hadn't seen in more than a decade. A small battered notebook with duct tape holding the spine together. My journal. 13-year-old Betty's journal. My hands shook when I opened it. The pages were covered in slanted handwriting and ink smudges, half poems, half confessions, the kinds of things a child writes when she has no one to talk to. One entry stopped me cold. I think if I disappeared, it would take them a week to notice, maybe more. I used to think families were like teams, but mine feels more like a company, and I'm the intern no one talks to. I could barely breathe. That girl, the one who wrote those words, had been waiting years for someone to take her hand. Someone to say, "You were right. You weren't imagining things. What they did was wrong." And I realized something with painful crystalline clarity. I couldn't change the past, but I could refuse to let them pretend it never happened. And that's how the idea for the box was born. A box not meant to hurt them, though it would. A box not meant to destroy them, though it might. A box meant to force them to see what they did. I bought a heavy wooden gift box, smooth and dark, the kind usually used for wine or specialty keepsakes. I lined it with dark satin. Then I began filling it piece by piece. First, a copy of my college diploma, something they'd never seen because they'd never been invited. Second, photos of the life I'd built on my own. My tiny but cozy living room. My design studio workspace with my sketches pinned to the wall, Hugo curled on my lap like he owned the place. Third, a printout of the award I received last year for a design project, an award no one in my family even knew existed. Fourth, 13-year-old Betty's journal entries. Not all of them, just the ones that showed exactly what their silence did to a child. And last at the bottom, face up, a photograph I took with that disposable camera the day they abandoned me. Me, at 13, standing in front of that filthy rest stop bathroom, sunburned, exhausted, terrified, alone. A picture none of them knew existed, a picture they would never be able to unsee. When I closed the box, it felt heavy, like it contained a decade of unsaid things. I wrote one line across the lid in clean white ink, "For the ones who forgot." Then I mailed it, registered mail, signature required. 2 days later, I received a notification on my phone, "Delivered." 2 hours after that, my phone rang. Block number. I let it go to voicemail. My father's voice came through, sharp, panicked, angry, the anger of someone confronted with evidence. "Betty, we got your box. This is not the way to handle things. If you wanted to talk, we could have talked." A lie. "This is dramatic. You're blowing everything out of proportion. And frankly, you're making a scene again. Don't ruin your sister's wedding." He hung up. For the first time in my life, the sound of his anger didn't make me shrink. It made me smile, because he was rattled by truth, rattled by me finally speaking a language he couldn't control. And that was only step one. Step two came quietly. Late at night, lit only by the lamp on my desk, I opened Celine's wedding website and RSVP'd. Attending, +1. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to slink into the back row. I wasn't going to be the forgotten sibling they hoped would stay far away. I was going to walk through the front gates of that vineyard with my head high and my life intact. Next, I called Sadi, my closest college friend, sharp-tongued, fearless, loyal, in the way only someone who has seen you cry can be. The moment I explained what happened, she didn't hesitate. "I'm coming with you," she said. "Also, do I get to wear something that makes your sister question her entire life?" "No," I laughed, "we're blending in." "Fine, I'll wear beige and diamonds." Then came the dress. I didn't want anything loud or dramatic. I didn't want to look like I was trying to steal anyone's spotlight. I wanted to look powerful, steady, untouchable. I bought a deep, charcoal gray dress, clean lines, structured shoulders, elegant, but simple. When I tried it on in the mirror, something strange happened. I stood taller. I looked like a woman who survived a rest stop ditch, a woman who built a life with her own hands, a woman who wasn't coming to cause a scene but to reclaim one. The next week, I started dropping breadcrumbs online, not spiteful ones, just enough to let Celine know I wasn't hiding. A photo of me and Sadi at brunch, a caption catching up before the big day. Celine liked it instantly. Then a picture of Hugo lying on the wedding invitation. Still deciding what to wear, I wrote. Another no comment. Finally, I changed my profile picture to the one of me at the Design Awards ceremony, smiling confident standing under the banner that read, 2023, Design Innovator of the Year. That's when Celine texted me. "Hey Betty, I saw your posts. I'm really glad you're coming. Just please don't make things heavy. This day is important. Let's keep things light, okay?" Light. She wanted lightness. After what they did, light. I didn't respond. My next step was harder. I reached out to my mother's sister, Aunt Marilyn, and my dad's cousin, Ed, the two people who had seen me at family events before everything cracked. They weren't close to me, not really, but they weren't cruel. I sent the same message to both. "I may need a moment of your time at the wedding. Please don't mention this to anyone." Both replied within minutes. Of course. Finally, the last unexpected event happened. I ran into Nate. It was the kind of coincidence that feels almost planned, the universe folding in on itself. I'd just finished therapy and ducked into a quiet coffee shop, still shaken from talking about my childhood. Nate walked in wearing his old high school varsity jacket like he'd frozen himself in time. He didn't see me at first. When our eyes finally met, his face flickered through surprise, irritation, and something else, recognition of the sibling he'd spent years dismissing. "Well," he said slowly, "look who crawled out of hiding." "Hi, Nate," I answered calmly. "Long time." He shrugged. "Yeah. You get Celine's invite." I did. "I'm the best man," he said, puffing up, waiting for admiration. "That makes sense," I replied. "You've always been good at showing up for her." He didn't catch the edge in my voice. Nate rarely caught anything that didn't benefit him. We exchanged a few more empty lines. Then I left. But something settled in me after that meeting. Not fear, not old hurt. Perspective. He hadn't changed. None of them had. But I had, and they were about to see exactly how much. The plan was set. The box was delivered. The RSVP was in. Sadi was ready. The dress was hanging in my closet. Now all that was left was the wedding itself. The stage where I would stop being the shadow in the family story and become something else entirely. The morning of the wedding felt too bright. Sunlight spilled through my blinds like it had no idea what kind of day it was walking into. The world outside was soft, calm, golden, and none of it matched the tension humming in my chest. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the charcoal gray dress over my hips. Structured, sleek, unapologetic. I looked like a woman who had walked through fire and didn't bother brushing the ashes off. Sadi arrived 10 minutes early wearing a beige gown she called strategically boring, paired with diamond earrings that were anything but. She took one look at me and grinned. "You look like a CEO who came to fire the entire board." "Good," I said. "They deserve it." We left the apartment. No turning back. The vineyard was about an hour outside the city. Rows of grapes curved along rolling hills, catching the sunlight like ripples on dark water. The place was undeniably beautiful, striking contrast to the ugliness of the memories I carried. Guests milled around in pastel dresses and pressed suits. Soft laughter floated across the lawn. Glassware clinked under white tents. A string quartet played something delicate and sweet. It all felt meticulously curated. Perfect. I stepped through the archway with Sadi by my side. Heads turned. Not in gasps or whispers, just flickers of recognition. Cousins. Old neighbors. A couple of extended relatives I barely remembered. A ripple went through the crowd like someone had dropped a stone into still water. I scanned the guests until I found them. My mother, my father, Celine, Nate. There was a moment, a very brief electric moment, where all four of them just stared. My mother's face went pale. My father's jaw clenched. Nate looked irritated like I'd shown up wearing a clown costume. And Celine, her smile faltered. Just for a second. I lifted my chin and walked past them without a word. Sadi whispered, "You good?" "Better than they are," I murmured. The ceremony itself was picture perfect. Celine walked down the aisle in a dress that shimmered like frost. Marcus looked at her like she was the sun. The vows were emotional and polished the kind wedding websites call storybook. I clapped politely with everyone else, but my heartbeat stayed steady, not moved, not rattled, just waiting. Because I knew my moment was coming. After the ceremony, as guests streamed toward the reception hall, vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers, tables dressed in gold accents, Sadi nudged me. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." We took our seats at table 14, tucked near the back, but with a clean line of sight to the head table. The table cards glittered under the lights. A centerpiece of white roses nearly hid us from view. Then the music softened. The lights dimmed slightly, and the DJ stepped up to the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we'll begin the toast shortly. First up, the best man." Nate strutted up like he'd been waiting for this moment since birth. He tapped the glass dramatically. His speech was exactly what you would expect from a man who peaked in high school. A few forced jokes about Celine bossing him around as a kid. Some recycled stories about her being a natural leader. A tearful moment about family always sticking together. Sadi leaned over and whispered, "I've auditioned for yogurt commercials with more emotional depth." I bit back a smile. When he finished, the room applauded politely. Then the DJ returned to the mic. "And now we have someone else who has requested to say a few words." Heads turned, confusion flickered, a pause stretched. Sadi squeezed my hand. I rose from my seat. The chatter died instantly. I walked through the table slowly. Not dramatic, not rushed, just calm in a way that made the floorboards sound louder beneath my feet. When I reached the front, the DJ offered me the microphone with a vaguely nervous smile. I took it, turned, faced the room. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady. Most of you don't know me. My name is Betty Hazlett. I'm Celine and Nate's youngest sister. A hush fell over the hall like a weighted blanket. Celine froze, smile still plastered but cracking at the edges. My father went rigid. My mother's hand clutched her napkin. I want to start by congratulating Celine and Marcus, I said. Your wedding is beautiful, truly, and I wish you both every happiness. A few guests nodded, relieved. I let a beat pass, but I continued softly. There are stories in every family that don't get told, stories that shape us, whether we want them to or not. The room stilled again. When I was 13, my parents left me at a rest stop on the side of the highway, 70 miles from home. No phone, no money, just a backpack. Someone in the room gasped. I slept in a ditch that night, I said, and I hitchhiked home the next day. The silence became absolute. I walked through our back door, dirty, exhausted, sunburned, and no one asked where I'd been. No one apologized. No one even acknowledged that I'd been gone. I turned my head slightly toward the head table. My father stared down at his plate. My mother's eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. Celine looked like she might faint. That moment, I said, broke something in me, something that took years to rebuild. I lifted my glass. But I rebuilt it, alone. I created a life, a home, a future, without any of you. A few whispers rippled through the room. And then weeks ago, I received an invitation to this wedding with a note asking me not to make a scene. Celine's eyes locked onto mine, wide, pleading, furious. I smiled, not cruel, just honest. I'm not here to make a scene, I said quietly. I'm here to reclaim the truth. My voice didn't shake. I'm here to say that what happened to me mattered, that I was a child, and that abandoning a child is not a mistake, it's a choice. A murmur rose from the guests, shock, disbelief, sympathy. But I didn't come here to ruin this day, I said. I came here because despite what happened, I deserve to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be more than forgotten. I raised my glass higher. To survival, I said. To truth. And to never being left behind again. For a moment, just a moment, the room remained frozen. Then Aunt Marilyn stood and clapped. Then Ed, then two cousins, then half the room. The applause wasn't explosive. It wasn't chaotic. It was steady, grounded, real. Sadi's eyes shone as she clapped too. I handed the microphone back, walked back to my seat, sat down. My heartbeat was slow and even. Celine didn't approach me. My father left the room. My mother stared at her hands like they were foreign. And I felt something I had never felt in their presence before. Peace. Pure, quiet, unshakable peace. By the time dessert was being served, Sadi leaned in and whispered, "Ready to go." "Yeah," I said, "I'm done here." We left before the cake was cut. We passed through the archway into the night air, into the clean quiet that waited outside the vineyard. And as soon as the doors closed behind us, I exhaled. Not from relief, from release. The little girl who slept in a ditch had finally spoken. And this time, everyone heard her. For the first time in my life, the silence felt kind. Not heavy, not punishing, not the kind of silence I grew up with, where quiet meant tension and fear and the threat of being noticed only when someone needed someone to blame. The silence was different. Soft, spacious, a place to breathe. Sadi drove us back toward the city with the windows cracked just enough to let the cool night air slip in. Neither of us spoke for the first 10 minutes. I stared out at the darkened vineyards, the fields rolling past in slow shadows, the sky wide and indifferent overhead. Finally, Sadi said, "Betty, that was one of the bravest things I've ever seen." I didn't feel brave. I felt empty. But not the hollow emptiness of childhood, the emptiness that comes after releasing something you've carried too long. "I wasn't trying to ruin it," I murmured. "I know," she said. "That's what made it powerful." I watched the road blur beneath us mile by mile. "They won't forgive me," I said, not as fear, but as a simple fact. Sadi glanced at me. "Since when has their forgiveness ever been worth more than your truth?" I swallowed. Let that settle. And for the first time, I realized forgiveness from them, or for them, wasn't what I'd been searching for all these years. It was recognition, acknowledgement, a sense that what happened mattered. And now, whether they admitted it or not, they'd heard me. When I got home, I hung the charcoal dress in my closet and stood there staring at it. It wasn't a celebration dress, not really. It was armor. And I no longer needed armor the way I once did. Hugo rubbed against my leg, purring loudly, demanding dinner. I fed him, then sat on the couch, curling my feet under me as he climbed into my lap and pressed his warm weight against me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a ghost. Over the following days, the ripples began. A letter arrived first from Aunt Marilyn, written in careful blue ink. "You were brave. You were right. And I'm sorry I didn't protect you when you were a child. Love, Marilyn. I cried reading it, not because she apologized, but because she saw me, really saw me. Then came a message on social media from a cousin who remembered bits and pieces of that summer, the tension, the shouting, the way I faded into rooms without anyone greeting me. He said he'd always wondered why I disappeared after turning 18. Even Marcus emailed. Short, simple. I didn't know. She didn't tell me. I'm sorry for what you went through. I hope someday Celine can talk to you too. But from my parents, nothing. Not a call, not a text, not a letter. And as the days stretched into weeks, I realized something that stunned me with its quiet truth. I didn't need anything from them anymore. Their absence no longer felt like a wound. It felt like space. Room for air. Room for peace. Room for a life I had painstakingly built without their shadows touching it. 3 months passed. One afternoon, I opened my closet with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I took the charcoal dress down, ran my fingers along the fabric, and smiled. Not out of pride, out of closure. I packed it neatly into a donation bag. Someone else could wear it now. Someone else could feel strong in it. Next, I went into my small home office and pinned a photo to my corkboard one Sadi had secretly snapped that night. Me standing at the microphone, the chandeliers glowing behind me, my shoulders straight, my chin lifted, my eyes calm. Below it in my own handwriting, I wrote, "You made it." Because I had. I had survived the ditch, the silence, the neglect, the rest stop, the forgetting. I had survived a childhood spent trying to shrink myself into something easier for them to love, and I had grown into a woman who no longer needed their love to breathe. True justice wasn't shaming them publicly. It wasn't bruising their pride. It wasn't even the applause that followed my speech. Justice was the life I built despite them, the softness I learned to give myself, the peace I carved out from the rubble they left behind. Justice was walking away, not running, not hiding, not looking over my shoulder, walking away on my own terms. A week later, as I sat with a mug of tea in my hands and Hugo snoring on my lap, a thought drifted through me, gentle, unhurried. They left me behind once, but I never stayed there, and I never will again.